Look.
Yeah, it looks very nice.
I
And we're live.
showered.
Nice.
Amazing. Well done.
Thank
Nice.
you.
Very well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I
So,
appreciate it.
and I did my hair today too.
Ooh!
No, I didn't. I need to cut it.
Get off.
I will do that probably over the weekend. Hey, I think we're live already. Hey
That would be
kids.
correct.
Hey kids, we are live. It is this is the International Geek of Livestream Mystery Show for the Tuesday the 16th of Mayo 2023. And tonight we're going to talk about Perl. I have no notes. I'm going to do this all from memory. So roughly half of it will be inaccurate. I may not get all the dates and names exactly correct, but we'll get the gist of it.
What if you get canceled because you don't have all the information? I can't believe you didn't write these
You know
down.
what? That's their loss. Honestly, that's their loss.
I love that. Love that mentality.
Someday ask me about cancel culture because I find that whole narrative hilarious.
I say it out of irony. I apologize.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
But you know me, I've got a story about everything.
That you do.
And two opinions about everything. There, you know the old expression. I'm going back to the Jewish jokes. You know the old expression. You want 3 opinions, ask 2 Jews.
I love it. Get that mess up.
All right. So, Perl. So I'm going to actually go back and start a bit before Perl, because Perl was an answer to a need. And so I'm an old Unix hacker. I go way back, with Unix back to the 70s, on PDP systems, on DEC mini computers. My first real computer was a PDP-8 that I bought surplus, and initially it had a paper tape and a line printer, and that was the interface. I soon got a regular terminal, and if I'm not mistaken, it was a Lear-Siegler ADM3A, which was, the common terminal for many computers back in that time. And on that terminal was where I learned C, and where I learned, Unix, Unix management, Unix system administration. And again, this is a really, really simple computer, very bare bones, very little memory.
Was it the same computer that you posted on your LinkedIn a few days ago that says like never obsolete?
No. That thing is from the 90s.
Well, that's why I remember.
Yeah.
I remember having a computer like that, so I didn't know how advanced it was.
Yeah, I eventually bought a hard drive for the PDP, and it cost something like $5,000, and again, it was surplus, and it was like, I think it was like 5 megabytes, not gigabytes, megabytes. And it was so that's where I got started. Eventually, I had an S100 system and was not able to get Unix on that. And then eventually I moved into DOS and Windows. My S100 system, my S100 system ran CPM, and eventually, so fast forward to the 90s, and I started playing around with pre-releases of Linux before it was 1.0. It was like release 0.7 or something, the first one that I installed. And I'm like, oh, this is familiar. This is Unix. And I, started writing a lot of shell scripts, and I guess in between that, I did a couple of gigs on Unix systems. I did a gig at IBM on their version of Unix. And I forget what it was called. It was something IX, and then at HP on their version of Unix, which was HP IX, if I remember correctly. And so, there was some of that, and I was familiar enough with it, and I was really super excited when Linux became available. For those who aren't familiar with all of this history, Unix was originally developed by Bell Labs, and it was licensed, and it was expensive, and it was proprietary. And there, at some point, I think in the 80s, is when the Berkeley distribution started up, and there were lawsuits around this. This was a clone of Unix, but it was supposed to be completely clean room, rewritten from scratch. And as it turned out, when people dug into the source code, they found that they had really lifted some pieces of the original AT&T Unix, and there were lawsuits about this.
I was going to say, what, because this had never really happened before, what were, like, since there were no laws set in place at the time, were there?
Well, they applied regular old copyright law to it, and it's not that it hadn't happened before. I mean, software had been around, really since the 50s. When with the advent of Fortran and COBOL, and Dr. Grace Hopper. Grace Hopper, the grandmother of modern computing. She only recently passed away. She was, people called her Amazing Grace. She was she started out, I believe, as a mathematician. She got fascinated with computers. She got hired by the Coast Guard as a consultant, and she eventually became a commissioned officer of the Coast Guard. And her whole job was, basically to work with the computers and to write. She wrote the first compiler, and she rose through the ranks. And when she retired for the first time, she retired several times. When she retired for the first time, they promoted her as the first woman admiral in U.S. military history, and she was, a rear admiral.
Girl power.
And she came back. They coerced her to come back, and she taught in Annapolis, and she taught computer science to the kids. She's famous for a few things, and I know this is a tangent, and I love this. I ought to bring up the chat here, shouldn't I? Hey, Tyler, good to see you. One of the things that she was famous for, is she carried around in her purse or her pockets strings of various lengths, and the shortest one was a nanosecond, and she called it a nanosecond. And this is how far light travels in a nanosecond. And then she had another one that was like a millisecond or a microsecond, and another one that was a millisecond. And so she used these as visual aids when she was teaching. And I just have so much respect for her, not just for all of her accomplishments in computing, but as a teacher. I never got to meet her, and I never got to sit in one of her classes, but everybody I know that did said she was the most amazing and wonderful teacher that they ever had. And so this is Grace Hopper. And yeah, so she was writing COBOL compilers back in the 50s, and she invented the first compiler, or she's credited with that anyway. And that is Admiral Dr. Grace Hopper, one of the most amazing humans ever. And Amazing Grace. So when it came around to the 1980s, and Berkeley Unix was under development, Oh, that's good to know. I'm sorry, I'm getting a text here. And yes, okay, good. That's all set. And eventually that got resolved, and Berkeley Unix, became unencumbered. And in time, Steve Jobs uh, licensed Berkeley Unix to be the basis for his next step operating system so when Steve Jobs was fired from Apple in the 80s, he started his own company called Next Computing, and they built these cubes. They were about this big, and they had, hey, Daniel, we're doing great. I am awesome. How are you? And yes, Tyler, Perl lives. So, and we'll get there. We're going through the subject is what happened to Perl. And before we can discuss what happened to Perl, we have to go through how did we get to Perl in the first place, and what was Perl all about, and what is Perl all about, really, because it's still very much a living language. So, so next step, then when Apple was failing badly and they had to coerce Steve Jobs into coming back, they basically bought Next from Steve Jobs, and that was sort of his bonus for coming back to Apple. And in the process, they adopted the Next Step operating system as OS 10 for Apple. And that's why our modern Apple computers, you open a terminal and you've got a Unix prompt, and it is basically Berkeley Unix under the hood. And so Apple computers actually run Unix with a graphical interface on top of that, which is what we normally interact with when we're using our mouse and pressing the little icons and shit. And that's even true of your iOS devices. That's all got Unix under the hood. I have done it, and I don't know how easy it is today, but in the past, it wasn't that hard to connect a serial cable into your iPhone and get a Unix prompt. And so that's all of that. Now, Unix and all of its derivatives, Berkeley, Unix, Linux, which is obviously the most common today. Just a second.
The Zoom tight.
Grazie.
You got to do the hand. Grazie.
Grazie.
I don't know why my R kind of
Yeah.
Mamma mia.
There.
So
Pizzeria.
So okay, settling in here. The interesting thing about the Unix operating system, and one of the main reasons that it has survived so long, keep in mind, Unix, C, all of these technologies that we use today, that everything is built upon. And I don't care what it is. It's Perl, it's Python, it's the it's Windows, it's OS 10. All of these things are built on C. And the original platform for C was Unix. And that's where it all came from. All of that. And all of that was built in the early 70s, like 69, 70, 71, 72, all around there. And those technologies, those systems are still very much alive and very much being used for everything today. C is virtually ubiquitous. There is very little of anything that doesn't have C underneath it. The Perl interpreter, the Python interpreter, your Swift compiler, your Java, all this stuff is written in C. And then, they give you the other language to deal with. And so because of that, C and Unix are tightly coupled. And why? Well, because they were built with, believe it or not, they were built with simplicity in mind. When you try to configure something, configure your Windows operating system, right? You need to go into that little editor that edits all of the weird little strings. I forget what they call it. That configuration stuff. Michael Morales wants to know if Kirsten will show her boots, and I'm just afraid he might have misspelled that.
That was Ricky's concern.
That was
as
my
well.
concern as well. Yes, that was. But I'm hoping it's because of the sick country theme of her sick background.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and he spelled your name Hingendoff.
Look at my name on the line.
Yeah,
it
look at that.
Oh,
he spelled it right.
Okay. You spelled it how? Yeah, you got it. Okay.
Well, she changed it after his comment.
All right. Okay. So, all right. Continuing on with our discussion. So, I forget what those twiddly little configuration things in Windows are called, but they're very twiddly and they're very cumbersome. In Unix, if you want to configure any of that stuff, you go in with a text editor, usually VI, and you edit a text file. And this is how everything is configured in Unix. And so there were tools built into Unix or distributed with Unix. Built in, distributed with, they were ubiquitous. They're always there. Tools like grep, sed, awk. These are tools for manipulating and searching text files. So my adult child, D, how's that for a gender and specific way to say that? My adult child, D, is in their 30s and has a degree in computer science. And we geek out together. This is like most of what we do together is we geek out. And they were over here, I don't know, a month or so ago, and showing me all this cool stuff on their laptop. And they have a Mac for the same reason that I do, because it's Unix under the hood, and I can get out to the command line and I'm sorry,
Mac gang. Yeah,
do all of my stuff, right?
I don't have the angles right.
And but I do when I want to run a program on my Mac, I'll press Command Space, which brings up the Spotlight search, and I'll type in its name, and it will find the application file, in the applications folder, and it'll run it, which I find very convenient. Well, what D does is uses the find command at the command line, which is a very text file, twiddly, but for them it's like this is how you do it. It's really simple. I mean, and it's really no harder than the way I do it, except they always have a terminal window open and I don't. So I'm going to actually, I'm going to share my screen, and we can, oh my gods, put this over here, put this over here. All right. And I'm going to do a screen share here. And again, I don't know, yeah, that's fine. We can.
Do you have to get the God powers?
I need permission, Kitty. I need permission to share.
Permission?
Yeah, so you go to the little share.
I know. I'm just considering there
whether Papa Bear to share shit. Okay.
So did that work?
We are.
Yay, it worked.
Yeah. Okay, so
we love it.
Okay, so there is my terminal, right? And so this is my command line on my desktop, which is named Saturn, and my account is named Bill W. It's old tradition. I've done it this way forever, as long as I can remember. My ID has always been Bill W on all my Unix systems. And I can type ls and I get a directory of my home directory, right? But
not me wondering what the W stands for.
So
it stands for wailing on those hoes.
I don't know if y'all can see this sudo sudo. This gives me this gives me root, right? And I can cd into the etc directory, which is where all of the configuration files are, right? So I can
That's
just
a lot of
say,
files.
less man.conf, boom. And this is the configuration file for the man command. And you see it's all text, right? If I, this is fun. This is all of the group IDs, right? And so it's all text files. And so if, for instance, if I wanted to find, now they don't do it this way anymore, you can't, there's a file called password like this, which has all the passwords in it, right? And so if I look at that file, you can see that it doesn't actually have passwords in it anymore, but in the past they used to have very poorly encrypted passwords in it. But this is like all of the little accounts on there. But if I wanted to find the Bill W account in there, I would say grep password Bill W. Oops, no, I see I got it backwards. Grep Bill W password, because I don't really use the grep very often anymore. Oh, look at that. Yeah, it's not even in there anymore because things are done very, very differently on a Mac. But this is your typical, Unix system, how things are, protocols, right? Here, this is the old protocols file with all of the port numbers and protocols in it. And you can, like if I wanted to, I'm gonna get my VI FTP. If I wanted to see the FTP port, boom, there it is. I can find the, this is the CFTP port because again, it's modern. It's a lot of stuff's changed over the years, right? But for manipulating these text files, there traditionally have been commands that do that, like grep, which I've just shown you. There's another one called sed, which edits stuff. SED, it's a system editor, and another one called awk, AWK, which is actually just the initials of the people who wrote it. Somebody A and Weinberger and Kernan, which are famous programmers. Anyway, so this was all, and you would code this stuff in shell, and I can show you some shell scripts. What do I got in here? Have anything interesting here? Oh yeah. Okay. So here it's a very small shell script, something that I wrote for creating new files. And oh yeah. So here it is. This is a fairly, oh no, this is a Perl script. Look at this. So rather than writing things in, and you can see I created in 2008, and I've never had to, I edited it once in November of that same year, and I have never had to change it again because Perl is so awesome. So this is a Perl script so in the past you would use sed, awk, and these other things, right? And he says, LL best command, Java best language. No. Java is, Java is a solution without a problem wrapped around a million bugs. We can have that conversation another day. I very much refuse to touch Java. It is a solution without a problem. There's nothing you can do in Java that I can't do better in C++. Okay, so
we should have you and Porcupine Butler go head to head one day.
I think that's a great idea.
Him in Java and you in your language of choice.
Yeah. So the way we used to do things was in a shell script with awk and sed and and grep and tools like that. The idea behind Perl, which was created by a guy named Larry Wall in the late 80s, around 89 or so, and it wasn't really released until the early 90s, or it was kind of sort of released, but it didn't really stabilize until about 94, 95. But the whole idea of Perl was to be able to do all of that stuff in one place. So I no longer need to write a shell script. I no longer need to use awk and sed and grep. Now I can just do all of that in Perl. And so I can write, really cool little scripts like this. I mean, honestly, I forgot I had this, and I haven't even looked at this in years, and it works great. I mean, I use it often. And what this does is this takes, I have these little templates. I call them skeletons, right? And so, like, for instance, if I want to create a new C++ or a new Perl script, I use the Perl skeleton, and the Perl skeleton looks like that. Here, let me do that in less so you can see it easier. So this is like the Perl skeleton, and you notice that I have in here these I have these little tokens that are surrounded by @ signs that get replaced, right? And so when I say, let me just go into my working folder here, and I can, in my working folder, I can say new Perl foo.pl, right? And it'll create this foo.pl, and it'll fill in all the stuff with, there's the date, there's the name of it, and it fills in all that stuff in the Perl script. And so this is like a really handy utility, and it was incredibly simple to write. It probably took me an hour tops. And I can configure it. I can run it from other shell scripts so that it'll use different skeleton files. And this is the power of Perl. If we look again, at this script, we can see that I'm using regular expressions for everything because Perl is really, really great at regular expressions. It's replacing all of these. Tokens very simply with regular expressions. I haven't looked at this code in 15 years, and I can go in here and I know exactly what it does. So let it be known that in my view, Perl is the cat's pajamas. Perl is a really, really great programming language, and I love working in Perl. So that's where Perl came from. That's what Perl's good at. When the web came along, the WWW, the World Wide Web, was developed on Unix systems. And so it works exactly like Unix systems. Everything on the web, and I actually contributed to the original protocols for HTTP and some of the technologies around the web. And if you go and you look at those RFCs, you'll see my name in them. But because it was all developed on Unix, using Unix zeitgeist, using Unix, the way that things are done on Unix, it's all based on text files. And even the protocols, the HTTP protocol, it's all basically text files in a stream going from server to client, right? And so all the headers are text, everything is text. And Perl was just a really, really brilliant way to do this. If you look at my first book, my CGI book that was published in 1995, all of my examples, I do 3 versions of each of the examples. I do one in C, one in shell, and one in Perl. And the Perl ones, obviously, are the ones that most people are going to look at and use. And I was looking at that book again this morning because I knew we were going to do this. And I look at that code and it's actually it still holds up, right? And it still works and it's still just fine for what it is. So that was Perl's strength. And when I'm gonna end this this share here. So that was Perl's strength. That was what Perl was good at. Now, what happened? Why is Perl, because today Perl is not dominant anymore. It's no longer in the top 10 languages. Python has taken its place. Very definitely, Python has taken its place. And I teach Python, I use Python because, just because of that, because this is the popular thing now. And I need to be relevant for my, so I can continue to do what I love to do for a living. The weakness of Perl is, in my view, its greatest strength, which is that its syntax is flexible. It's easy to do something in 5 different ways. There's a Perl philosophy that there's more than one way to do it, and there's usually more than 4 ways to do it, right? So because of that, it's actually a little bit difficult to teach and a little bit difficult to learn. So for those of us who had cut our teeth on Unix and had been using grep and sed and awk and all those tools for all those years, Perl was a no-brainer. It was simple for us to learn. We already knew C. We already knew, curly braces. We knew $signs. I mean, most of that Perl syntax is pretty much ripped off from K-shell, and then or from awk, like the slashes for the regular expressions. That's sed and awk. So all of that stuff had a background that those of us at the time who were already doing this stuff in other ways, we understood it, and it was easy for us. But to try to teach a novice about regular expressions, because in Perl, there are some things that you just need to use regular expressions. It's built into the language. It is baked in. In fact, other languages and other systems use the Perl regex system, regular expressions, because it's a superior regular expression system to the other ones that were out there. Perl normalized regular expressions and it integrated it, baked it into the language. Tyler Bird, I think they taught Perl alongside sed, awk, and grep in university. I bet they did. It makes total sense in that context. But now you take a novice, some web designer who wants to learn, how to write some basic scripts, and you try to teach them Perl without first teaching them Unix and C and awk and sed and grep. And it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a bit of a learning curve for them. Now, around the same time that Perl was being developed, there was this other guy. Oh my God, what's his name? Hang on a second here. Guido van Rossum. He is the BDFL is the acronym they used to refer to him in the Python world, the benevolent dictator for life. He started creating Python in the late 80s, around the same time that Larry Wall was working on the first versions of Perl. Python didn't catch on at first because Perl was just so intuitive for those of us who had already been using those other tools. But down the road, really by the early 2000s, by around 2005, maybe 10 years after Perl really started taking off, people started using Python because Python is easier to teach. It's easier to learn. There is only one way to do it in Python. And for the vast majority of purposes, you do not need regular expressions. You have to understand, For the average Joe, regular expressions looks like transmission line noise. It is not intuitive. And, we can get into the details of regular expressions another time. But for most people, you try to explain regular expressions to them, and before they get 10 minutes into it, their brain is exploding. Again, for those of us who've been using them for decades, okay, I understand, here's what the square brackets do, here's what the backslashes do, here's, a dot to match any character. I mean, these things are, almost intuitive to us because we've been doing it for decades. But you try to teach that to a novice, and you've got yourself, a challenge. I love a challenge. I would be happy to do that. And I haven't looked at my Perl course on lynda.linkedin for a long time. I'm going to start calling it that, lynda.linkedin. I haven't really looked at my Perl course in a while, but I know I've got a chapter in there on regexes, and I know that I enjoyed teaching that and putting that together. I need to look at that again and see how I did that. I will, because I'm going to do a Perl course at some point in the next year. That's a definite. But Python didn't require that. For Python, you've got, if, then, else, while, for. Even your for loops are all, iterators. They're, none of this, C style for loops with the 3 conditions separated by semicolons. I mean, again, I know how to teach that because I also teach C++, but that's, that is not as easy for people to learn as, for this in that. So over time, Python kind of took over. Now, the thing about Python is it's designed from scratch to be its own thing. It was designed from scratch to be simple and relatable and readable and learnable. There's only one way to do a thing. That's actually one of the there's a list of Python philosophies. I forget what they call it. Yeah, the Zen of Python, right? But one of those is there should be one, and preferably only one, obvious way to do it. That's the way that it's worded. And for most people learning the language, that makes a lot more sense than there's 5 ways to do this thing, and I'm going to use this way in this circumstance. I'm going to use that way in that circumstance. I was having this conversation with somebody, it might have been Tyler, on my Discord recently, about, I love the postfix conditionals in Perl. I can say this, if that. I could also say if this, that, right? But I could also say that, if this. And I like that because under circumstances where I'm reading the code and to me, the condition is the thing that matters, then I'm going to write the if first. And if it's the action that really matters that I want to highlight in my code, then I'll put the action first and the if afterwards. And I really love those postfix conditionals. You got postfix loops in Perl. I love that, but I love having the multiple ways to do it thing as somebody who comes from that world. Most of my students do not come from that world, and trying to learn all that stuff is just a lot of extra baggage in their brain. And so in my view, this is what happened to Perl. Also in Python, at least in Python 2 and much more so in Python 3. Python 3 is where the language really came into its own. And in Python 3, everything is an object, everything is a class. You can inherit from anything. And object-oriented programming, object-oriented programming is the thing these days. Everybody wants to have objects. Everybody wants to have patterns. Everybody wants to have all of these modern coding tools. People are going to laugh when I say this, but object-oriented programming is a solution without a problem. I'm going to say that. I teach it. I use it. I love it. I'll write classes for things. It makes sense. But honestly, I could do all that stuff in C without objects and have it be just as readable and just as usable. And I know that a lot of people would argue with me, and that's fine. Objects have some conveniences like, destructors, so that when an object goes out of scope, it can automatically, release its resources. And that's fine. And again, I teach these principles. And if you look at my STL book, you'll see, I get really into the weeds with this stuff, and why it's useful. But it's useful only for the programmer. It does not make the code any better. And it often adds, so the purpose of any programming language is to be written and read. And really its purpose is to be read, even more than to be written. The reason that we write code in a language like Perl or Python or C or C++ is so that somebody can come down the road 15 years later, like I just looked at that code from 15 years ago and I knew exactly what it did, right? If I had written all of that in assembly language, it would take me a minute to read it and to understand it. And that's why we have higher level languages. It's not because it makes the code work any better. It's because it makes it easier for the programmer. So all of these languages are all about the convenience of the programmer. And so when we look at it that way, a language like Python is going to be a lot more convenient for a lot more novice programmers, which is probably 9 out of 10 programmers would qualify as novice or occasional programmers. Then something like Perl, which is they're going to look at that, and they'll look at even that code that I showed you with the regular expressions in it. Those were obvious to me. Those regular expressions were obvious to me. Let me go back here if I can find that. I come in here and let me come down here, right? And so this is the program I'm using is called Less, and it uses VI keystrokes. I have been using VI, or what y'all kids today call it Vim, but it's really just VI. I've been using VI since the 70s. My fingers, I don't have to think about it. My fingers know, J and K and, zero and dollar and, all these things for using VI. So I'm like doing this intuitively, scrolling through this. And if I wanted to, search for a string, and that's actually a regular expression, right? That I just typed there. So anyway, we can look at these regular expressions here, and these are really, really intuitive to me, and they're actually, have very little, regex stuff. The GIS at the end, global, G stands for global, I stands for ignore case, and S stands for treat it all as one string. And this stuff, I know this stuff intuitively because this predates Perl by decades, all of this stuff. So I look at this and this is obvious. But if some novice comes along here and he sees this while loop, they're going to go, I'm sorry, what on earth is that? And you're going to have to explain it to them. So it defeats, for a lot of purposes, it defeats the fundamental purpose of programming, which is for the code to be readable. And for 9 out of 10 people today writing code, it is not their full-time job. It was never their calling in life. They're probably a designer or, a stay-at-home mom trying to build a website or whatever, right? And they don't want to have to learn that. They would rather pick up a language like Python, which they can learn in a weekend, at least enough to get that little job done. And maybe they'll have to Google a few things, right?
Look at Ricky, who did all the transcripts for your SQL videos.
Right.
And she literally, I mean, with the prompts that you gave her, she knew how to do it.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't really know how many hours she spent on that in total. Kind of
a lot.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
maybe you don't want to like admit that
Yeah.
to the world, but I mean, it's something that, I mean, you can have it on in the background, or, you know, just like constantly be learning. You can stick your STL or SQL cookbook underneath your pillow and use osmosis, right?
Absorb the knowledge.
Yeah. So I mean, again, I can't emphasize this enough. The purpose of a programming language is not to be able to write efficient, effective code. The purpose of a programming language is to be able to read that code 15 years later. And for the average novice programmer, Python does that better. For me, and where I come at it from, I love writing in Perl. And for me, Perl is like a brilliant language. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what I think is essential for a well-rounded programmer, and then separately, what is essential for a programmer starting today and wanting to get a job. And maybe we can talk more about this in another episode, but I just want to touch on these things briefly. I keep 2 languages on the top of my head, right? If I were to go today and write some system in Perl, I would need to refer to the documentation. I'd probably pull out my old Camel book because I like books, or I might Google stuff. I might do a combination of those things because I'm not going to remember all of it. And I know that in the 10 years since I've really written anything serious in Perl, there's probably a lot of new stuff that I want to know too. And when I get around to doing my Perl course, I'm going to dig in like that, and I'm going to spend some time at it and refamiliarize myself with it so I can do a good job of teaching it. But I keep 2 languages on the top of my head. I keep fresh with 2 languages, C++ and Python. And neither of those would be my first choice, but they are the choice of most people for those purposes. C++ for systems work, systems level works, which is code that needs to run fast, it needs to run in a small amount of space, and it needs to run efficiently and use the minimum amount of battery power on a laptop, because laptops are the thing today. I remember back in the late 70s, I did a contract. I was always a contract programmer. I could never get a job as a programmer at like a major company, except NASA. NASA would hire me because they would just say, oh, you can do this? Great. We don't care if you have a degree. I don't even have a high school diploma. I left home when I was 12. And so, you know, all of this stuff I've learned from libraries, from mentors, and, you know, in modern times from Google. My favorite language for systems work would be C, not C++, but C++ is fine. I'll write in C++. That's what people want to read today. For the same reason that we use Python instead of Perl, you're going to find a lot more people who can read C++ than who can read C. And that's fine. But you need 2 languages. You need one for that low level, it touches the system, it's got to be fast and efficient and run on a small amount of space and use a minimum amount of power, that kind of stuff. So for that, C or C++. The other language that you need is stuff that you can write quickly, that can be read clearly, and that does not have to be super efficient. So this is for things like web scripts, utilities on your system, you know, controllers like controlling a 3D printer or controlling DaVinci Resolve or something like that. You need a language for those things. And you don't want to do those things in C or C++ because those are compiled languages and they need to run through a compiler. The development cycle is more tedious and they're not cross-platform. I mean, the object code isn't cross-platform. The source code is, but it has to be compiled for every different system, and you don't want to do that. If I want to share a 3D printer script with somebody who's running Windows and I'm running a Mac, I can do that with Python. I can't do that with C or C++. So I need those two languages. I do not need any more languages. I can do anything in those two languages, and I can do it well. I can do it efficiently. I can do it effectively, and I can do it in a manner that somebody can come down the road 15 years from now and read the code and know what it does. I don't need Java. I don't need, well, JavaScript I might need for web pages because the browser runs the JavaScript, right? I hate JavaScript with the fire of 1,000 suns. It is the stupidest language ever written. Maybe not the stupidest, but it's right up there with fucking Java. So, and JavaScript and Java are not related. They named JavaScript because people were really into Java at the time, and they thought that would make it more popular, and it worked.
I never knew that.
Y'all are so gullible. So, for the purpose of actually getting work done, I only need those two languages. For the purpose of getting a job, I need to know a dozen languages. Well, or I need to know the one that they are using at this job. But most of these job descriptions, I look at these job descriptions on LinkedIn, and I'm like, why do they need me to know 40,000 different things and have 10 years experience in all of them? That makes no sense. There's no way that this job requires all of those different things. If you're doing data stuff, you're going to need to know SQL. You might need to know a particular dialect of SQL. If you're doing web stuff, you're going to want to know some JavaScript. If you're doing business stuff, you may actually want to know some Java because all the fucking COBOL people are switching to Java for reasons that make no sense whatsoever. All that business stuff, all that accounting business stuff could easily be done in Python, easily and effectively and efficiently. The thing about Java is that it's as complicated to write as C++, but it runs about as efficiently as Python. So what is the point? And it's supposed to be cross-platform, that you can take these object files and put them on anybody's system. And that mostly works. The JRE crashes a lot. It leaks a lot. I'm sorry. Don't get me started on Java. Anyway.
For another time.
That's all a discussion for another time. But Tyler and whoever else was asking for this, I know there were a couple of people asking for this. I hope this answered your question of whatever happened to Perl. Yes, Kirsten.
Do you know who highly requested this conversation and he is not here?
Uh-oh, who is it?
Gary.
Oh, right, Gary. Yeah.
Where he at though? Like, wish I could have his number and just be absolutely just chain texting him right now.
Okay, so Tyler is the one that I was texting with on our Discord. And yes. But Gary also. So, well, Gary can look at the replay and that's fine.
He better.
Yeah, he better. Yeah, okay, so Ernesto, when I code in Perl, I feel so much freedom, several ways to achieve the goal. When I code in Python, I feel like I have to stick to the rules. What I like the most from Python is the wide availability of libraries. That's right. And that's another big difference. The Python libraries tend to be of higher quality. Tyler is after my heart. Java is immature.
Don't be hating on my porcupine like that.
But yeah, Ernesto, you're absolutely right. I love that about both of those. I love about Perl, but the Perl, whatever they call it, the place where you get all the libraries in Perl, it's such a catch as catch can. It's just a mess. And you go in and you look at these libraries and you have no idea what their quality is. You have no idea how good they are. I mean, you could read the code and try and figure, if I'm going to do that, I might as well write the damn thing myself. And for most of my purposes, I do exactly that. I write my own libraries in Perl. I do that in Python too, because I enjoy writing libraries. But, if I was doing a gig, a contract gig for somebody, which thankfully I don't really have to do very often anymore, then Porcupine Butler, says Kirsten and sends a heart. There, Kirsten.
Thank you. I'm glad you deciphered that.
Kirsten is feeling loved. All right. So that's pretty much the time we got for this. Thank you guys so much for showing up and for all your participation. I really appreciate that. I love that this is starting to take off. We have an initiative coming up in probably the next month that's going to expand the audience of this channel a lot. And we're really, really excited for it. And so let's cherish these days when we all know each other's name, and we can have these intimate little chats like this. I know that this means a lot to me, and it means a lot to me to get to know you guys like this, and gals, you know, at the same time, expanding the channel is going to be necessary to keeping it alive at some point. So, that's going to be happening in the next month or so. Tomorrow we're just having the morning live stream, and I guarantee it'll be a lot of fun. These are getting better. We're getting better at doing our thing, and y'all are participating more, and that's making it a lot more fun for everybody. And then Thursday, again, we'll have the two. We'll have the one in the morning, as usual, and in the evening, Porcupine Butler is in love with Kirsten.
Love feelings mutual, babe.
There you go. You know, I'm reminded of in the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night, when they're at the TV studio and they're showing the different Beatles, and it shows John Lennon and it says, "Sorry, ladies, he's married." And
I guarantee that did not stop people. I'm just saying.
Oh no, it didn't. No, it didn't. But yeah. So, but on Thursday we're going to talk a little bit about self-care, and you know, for a lot of programmers and a lot of, you know, just a lot of people who are working so hard these days, because it's just gotten so much damn harder to earn a living than it ever had in the past. And so for a lot of people, I know that this is going to be really valuable. I hope you'll turn into it, and, you know, and embrace the subject there. All right. Anything else from either of you kids?
Yes.
I don't know where she is.
I'm here. I exist.
She's right there.
Exactly. Actually, the self-care thing is relevant to what I was going to say. What I was going to say is tonight I am actively making like a giant industrial batch of my homemade curry, and that is how I practice self-care, but it's also how I show love. Like, I show love through
she's bringing
curry.
Some to me tomorrow.
I am. Oh, you have no idea. This is going to be the best curry. Okay, so I have had I put bone marrow, like bone broth, beef broth bones in the oven, and I roasted them and I added them to the stock. So this is going to be incredibly healthy, because there's a lot of really great collagen and nutrients and all sorts of wonderful vitamins and such in beef bones. But I also added some beef, and I splurged. I got 3 different kinds of mushrooms that I will be adding to this curry, and radish, and
this is her Japanese heritage with the different kinds of mushrooms.
Yes, but I also am going to channel my Mexican heritage. I'm going to add 1 chayote squash, because I love the way chayote squash picks up flavor of like the curry flavor. And yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about it, and I've been like looking forward. I gotta say, and I know I've said this to both Kirsten and Ricky, I'm the luckiest guy in the world to have these two in my world. And, you know, especially Ricky here, helping to take care of me and making sure that I'm, you know, well fed. And well, the thing with curry is curry heals everything. It heals any type of pain, emotional, mental, physical, any ailment. Basically it's magic. Asian chicken soup. Oh, no, not even close. Chicken curry would be Asian chicken soup. Chicken pho would be Asian chicken soup. This is just chicken soup. No, I look at it because chicken soup is Jewish penicillin. What did she say that elicited that reaction?
Chicken soup for the soul. Did you ever read those books?
Every single one. I'm a sucker for short stories.
My grandmother could have written them. in our world, we call chicken soup Jewish penicillin.
I
Oh
love
my
it.
gosh, that's
Yeah.
hilarious.
So, the Asian version of that is obviously curry, and I am here for it. You know how much I love your curry.
I
Wonderful.
love that you
Yeah.
just said I'm here for it.
Yeah.
She's getting with the times, people. One question, and I almost
Yeah.
forgot, is one of the 3 mushrooms that you used shiitake?
How did you know that?
Because that was my favorite joke growing up.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
It was how I
shiitake.
could get away with cussing because I wasn't allowed. I was
Oh,
very,
shiitake,
my
yeah.
mom was very by the book. And so
Shiitake.
I'd be like,
You'd say, "Oh, shiitake."
And my mom would go, Kirsten, what did you just say? And I'd be like, it's a mushroom, Mom. Chill
Jeez,
out.
a mushroom.
God.
It's my favorite mushroom.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, she
I-
speaks Val.
Literally don't eat mushrooms at all. I can't stand the texture. So more power to
Okay.
you.
Thank
I
you.
love mushrooms, and I mean, y'all know how much I love Asian food, and mushrooms are always a big part of that. As is tofu, and you get far enough into East Asia, and you get spam too.
Oh, yeah. Kirsten
And
love her
there's,
spam.
nothing I love so
Wait.
much. Well, there's a lot of things I love so much, but I do love some spam musubi. That's
I literally ate spam for lunch today. So thanks for calling me out
Okay.
like that.
Well, there you go. There you go. And you had musubi for the first time when you were here last.
But I had heard about it for 7 years. My husband grew up in Hawaii. So
Oh, okay. Yeah,
they
well,
sell
that's
they
like
sell
comfort
those,
food in
like, at-
Hawaii.
yeah, so they sell them at McDonald's and on the street, street vendors. And they,
Yeah.
him and his family always talk about it. So I was really excited to try it the
Well,
last time I came up to
Dee-
visit.
Dee grew up on the Big Island. His mom lives there.
Right. Yeah.
Their mom. I'm sorry.
Good catch.
I've been watching the Jeopardy Legends tournament, or whatever they call it. It's not the Tournament of Champions. It's like this special thing they're doing with their Champions of Champions. I forget what it's called, but I'm watching that, and one of them uses they them, one of the contestants.
Mhm.
And watching Ken Jennings be respectful of that and
Yep.
just be very consistent with that, it warms my heart. It really does.
I did a filter on TikTok today that was going to tell me what my pronouns were. And I really just got my feelings hurt because it said he, him. And I was like,
Really?
I probably would have been happy and fine with anything else. But I was like, so I
But
look
none
like
of
a
this,
dude.
none of this toxic masculinity for you, huh?
It really did that to me. I was like, okay, and that's enough internet for today. And then I hop on the live. So
There's a joke going around on the internet that toxic masculinity implies the existence of "oops, I did it again" masculinity.
That's so funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
a
Free
Britney
Britney
Spears joke.
again. Free Britney again. That's some crazy stuff. I'll talk about that tomorrow, though. 'Cause
She's coming back to Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
Good
if
for her
that's
going out
actually
and
her,
touring.
if that's actually her, and she's not locked up again, because man, there's some suspicious activity going on over there.
Well,
I don't know if you know about that, but I hope
Because-
not. I really hope not, but it doesn't look good.
now that she's out from under the financial strain of her family just taking all of her money, I'm glad to see her out touring again, because that's how artists make money these days. And if she's going to do a little residency here in Vegas, she's going to do a tour. I hope she makes herself, some good money that she can sock away for her kids, and she really needs that. So I've always respected her as an artist. I don't know if I've told this story before. We are way over time, but I'm still telling stories. So I years ago, I had a girlfriend who took me to a Britney Spears concert, and she was really excited to go, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm excited to take you because it's what you
Britney,
want,
bitch.
right? And I have never been hit on so much at a concert than by all the gay guys at the Britney Spears concert. I mean,
We love that for you.
because I'm this big, tall, hairy bear,
Yeah,
And-
literally
and-
a bear.
Literally.
and they were
Literally.
so into me.
He said, "Ego officially boosted." Thanks,
I love it.
fellas.
I loved it. You know, I'm like fighting him off with a stick.
He's like, "Stop it!" But actually, like, tell me
No, I'm
more.
like, oh, stop it! I'm here with my girlfriend. But you know, they're like accidentally bumping into me, and I know these moves. I've been a guy
Oops, I
longer
did
than
it
you
again.
Perfect, impeccable timing, Ricky. That was
No, thank-
beautiful.
Thank you. Man,
Anyway.
sometimes I wish women hit on other women the way that men hit on other men, because it's like so open. With women, it's like, oh, I like your top. And it's like, okay, do you like my top in a straight way, or do you like my top in a queer way? It's very difficult to tell.
Just assume your favorite, assume your favorite meaning of that.
I wish.
Want that to mean?
Well, yeah, that's the issue too.
Every time somebody compliments you on your top, you just like wink at them.
Yeah, well, I have
too.
0 Riz, so that might be difficult.
I like your top too.
What'd you say about top? Topping?
Like
what? Who's top?
No.
With your permission, I could like your bottom.
Oh my goodness.
He was gonna go there.
Yeah, I mean, I have a male mind, and so I'm gonna always see this first from a male perspective. I do try to, and someday I do have to tell you that story about how I became an honorary lesbian, but that's for another day.
Taking note of that, that needs to be a whole conversation.
Yep.
Anyway,
all right, I gotta get back to the kitchen.
We will see you tomorrow morning. Have a great evening. Love you all, and I appreciate all of your participation this evening. I'll put my water down here. Love you. Bye.
Bye, y'all.